Welcome everybody to part 2 of this 2-part series. If you're just finding me now and haven't watched part 1 yet, go check that out. I'll pop a link in the description box below. Then come right back, I'll wait. This 2-part series is for people who are thinking about flipping furniture as a legitimate business, whether that's full-time or part-time. Or maybe people that are already doing it but are just looking to scale up. Or people who just love the business and are hoping to pick up a few tips and tricks and information. Some of these points could easily apply to other businesses or even just life in general. Now, caveat, I am no expert. These are just things that I've learned over time, either by experience or research as I was learning to do this. And my hope is that it might save you guys a bit of time and effort because there is a lot to this. There are so many things I could have done for each lever, but I had to sort of pick and choose. Maybe I'll do another video like this at some point in the future. But for now, let's get into it. Letters N to Z, here we go.
My name is Angie, and I'm the one behind Transcend Furniture Gallery, a business created from the love of vintage furniture and the desire to take broken, dated, and unloved things and turn them into modern treasures. Sometimes I paint, and sometimes I don't, but I always do what I can to save old pieces from the trash. Welcome to my workroom.
N is for newer furniture versus older furniture. So this is something I get asked fairly often, whether I prefer working on newer pieces or vintage and antique items. For me, it's a no-brainer. Vintage and antique is where it's at, both in terms of style and construction. While there are certainly some amazing furniture makers out there, the pieces are very expensive, obviously, the time and effort that goes into them. But aside from that, I don't like flipping furniture just for the sake of a new look. So for that reason alone, I tend to stay away from newer items. I like taking pieces that are past their prime, on their last legs, and obviously that's going to be vintage and antique items. It's an old saying, they don't make things like they used to. And I've used it in reference to furniture many times, but it's not entirely accurate. They absolutely do make furniture like they used to, but it's not what most high volume, low quality stores sell these days, and it's not where most of our buying dollars go. There are still some incredible craftsmen and women doing unbelievable work, but people just aren't accustomed to paying those prices anymore, or I should clarify, most people aren't. And as for factory-made items, obviously there are still high-end pieces in production today. Again, the majority of us don't have the budget for that. As such, the vast majority of people are flocking to stores like the one that rhymes with Wybia and other big box furniture stores that are carrying similar quality pieces. The older construction is often better, but not always. People say all the time, oh, furniture today is all that veneer and presswood crap. Actually, most of the pieces I work on are veneer. It is actually very common in antique and vintage pieces, especially mid-century. There's nothing cheap about veneer. Have you ever tried buying it? Trust me. Veneer is actually wood. It's just thinly sliced, and that allows furniture makers to have pieces with amazing wood grain that doesn't break the bank. And it also stretches a slab of exotic wood further by getting several pieces out of it rather than just one piece. 9 times out of 10, the person saying that is thinking of laminate, which is not at all the same thing. And many folks don't realize either that large portion of mid-century furniture is not solid wood. Yes, some are, but most are walnut, teak, mahogany, and rosewood veneer over some other substrate, usually plywood or presswood, and sometimes a solid, cheaper quality wood like birch or poplar. Veneered pieces are not inferior to solid wood. In fact, in some situations, they're actually better than solid wood. They're not flimsy. Laminate, on the other hand, can be flimsy. But again, that depends on the substrate. Some laminate is actually over solid wood. You see it a lot on mid-century drawer fronts, where you've got a solid wood drawer front and then a laminate on top of it. I don't know why they do that, but they did. But most of today's laminate is over presswood with inferior framing like MDF or more pressed wood, whereas most mid-century pieces have solid wood frames even if the outside is a laminate or veneer. So I think for me, the 3 main reasons I like working on older pieces versus newer pieces is number 1, the newer ones just haven't had time to wear down yet, and I don't like redoing something that doesn't need it. 2, I like the framing of older pieces. The solid wood frame, you can't beat it, and it doesn't really matter if the piece is solid wood entirely, or veneer or laminate. As long as it's got a solid wood frame, it's a good stand-up piece of furniture. And 3, there's just something about those older designs. Don't get me wrong, some of the newer furniture out there today is absolutely gorgeous. We have a beautiful king-size bed that it's newer, but it's based on mid-century styling, and we love it. But I am a sucker for authenticity and history, to be honest, character. O is for onward and upward. Keep moving forward. Seems simplistic and obvious, but we all get hung up on that sometimes, myself included. A lousy comment from someone who hates the color you painted something can ruin your entire day, even if you really don't give a shit what some stranger online thinks. That dresser drawer that just won't go back together no matter what you try to do. That piece you thought you could save, but it's now 3 days in, about $100 in materials, and it's currently sitting out on the side of the road. It happens. And now you're rethinking this whole thing. No one is gonna get it right every time. There have been many pieces that I've done, and looking back, I think, oh my God, what was I thinking with that color or that stain or that combination? And many I would probably do differently today if I could. But it's wasted time. It's literally time wasted from your life to analyze these things over and over again. Give it an hour of your time and then move on. Figure out how you can learn from it and just let it go. There will always be someone to complain about what you did, whether you painted an antique piece, heaven forbid. They didn't like the color you picked. There's always going to be something, is my point. So just ignore them, block them, and let it go. The older I get, the more I resonate with this. I'm going on 42 years old. It's true. And I spent the first 3/4 of my life worrying about everything that didn't go as planned. I'm really sensitive when people take time out of their lives, out of their day, to leave a crappy comment saying,
"Oh, I don't like the color you picked."
Like, why write that? Do you think the person's gonna repaint it because you said that? Do you think someone's gonna strip the paint off something because you didn't like the fact that they painted an antique? No, it's probably already sold and is now happily living in someone's home, and all you did was insult a total stranger. So do you feel good about yourself now? If you're the recipient of one of these people, onward and upward. Have pity on people that are so miserable that they just have to spread it around. And even if you did do something and mess something up, everyone on the planet does. Just make mental notes, learn the lesson that life is offering to you in that moment, and do better. I say it all the time, when we know better, do better. We can't do better till we've learned all the lessons, yeah? P is for PPE. I am still the worst for this, but I'm getting better. Like I said, I'm coming up on 42 years old and I don't feel as invincible as I once did, so I am getting better with this. PPE stands for personal protective equipment. People might not even realize this is a thing when it comes to furniture flipping, but unless you're only using low or zero VOC paint on everything, chances are you are dealing with chemicals at some point. Strippers, stains, lacquers, shellac, primers, anything sprayed. These all can have serious health consequences if you're not protecting yourself properly when you're using them. Also, your eyes and ears need PPE as well. This is a list of things that I use regularly, and I'll post links to what I can in the description box below. Chemical resistant gloves. These are perfect when dealing with toxic strippers, and regular gloves may not suffice. They're usually between $10 and $20 online and are a must if you're dealing with strippers and other potent chemicals. Regular gloves. I use these on almost every piece that has stain. I don't want to get that stuff on my hands. You can also use reusable gloves, which is obviously more environmentally friendly, which I do sometimes. Someone had given me a box of leftover vinyl gloves, so I'm cycling through those before I go back to my reusable ones. They're also handy when you're applying paint, glazes, waxes. Most of those things that I use are non-toxic anyway, but I still don't want them all over my hands and under my nails. I don't have much for nails, but I don't want dirty ones. Ear protection. If you use a shop vac, power sander, table saw, or any other loud tools, protect your ears. I didn't for the first 2 or 3 years of doing this. By about year 4 though, I started to notice my ears would ring when using my power sander, which is hooked up to a shop vac for dust collection. I invested in some safety earmuffs and so much better. Really look into this if you're using any kind of power tools. They're also really handy to have when your spouse asks where that dresser came from that wasn't in the hallway yesterday. Eye protection. I admit I do need to get better with this one. I do have safety glasses for when I'm using the circular saw or the jigsaw, but I should probably be using them for any procedure with power tools. The sander doesn't kick up a ton of dust because I have it hooked up to a shop vac, but there have been times when I've been working at something at eye level and should really be wearing glasses. Dust mask. If you aren't dealing with aerosols, a good dust mask made specifically for filtering fine particulates is perfect for when you're sanding. This is another one I have to get better with, as I do have asthma and I know that even a small amount of this dust in the lungs is really bad. You can use a respirator while sanding if you have the right cartridges, but if you're not also using it for aerosols, a good dust mask should be just fine on its own. Respirator. If you are occasionally dealing with aerosols, you need to have a respirator. I use mine anytime I'm spraying lacquers, primers, top coats, or using my Wagner spray gun to spray paint. And here's the thing about spraying paint. Fusion mineral paint, which is what I use the most, is very safe to brush on, to roll on, but I'm told there hasn't been enough testing yet when it comes to spraying it. So when you're dealing with all these little fine particles, they're not guaranteeing that those are completely safe. So just protect yourself, wear a respirator. It's not just that brand, any brand that is considered non-toxic. Generally, there's a statement somewhere on the safety sheet that states that it hasn't been tested for aerosols. So just something to think about. A regular mask, even a really good dust mask, is not gonna cut it for dealing with aerosols. You need to have a respirator. They aren't terribly expensive, but they are a small investment. But I would say this is a must-have when you're doing any kind of spraying or dealing with vapors like mineral spirits or alcohols of any kind. Paint, clothes. This one obviously has nothing to do with safety, but unless you don't mind having paint on every piece of clothing you own, invest in a shirt and maybe some pants or shorts to wear when you're working on the furniture. I am the worst at going back into a workroom with new clothes on, or fresh clothes at least, thinking,
Oh, this is just a quick little touch-up, I'll be fine.
I even look at a jar of paint and it somehow gets on my clothes. It's a scientific fact. I often watch people in these videos with crisp white shirts and like nice new pants on, painting furniture, and I think, how in the are they not covered in paint right now? You can also wear a smock if that helps, but I just recommend a trip to the thrift store, just get some cheap clothes that you can paint in. Quality over quantity. I see this over and over again, especially with people just getting into the business. They realize there's bucks to be made here, and within weeks, they're pumping out piece after piece after piece, basking in their successes. Here's the thing though, volume is not necessarily success. If half of the people you're selling to aren't happy overall with your product, they're not gonna buy from you again, and they're certainly not gonna recommend you to other people. To turn this into a full-time sustainable career, you need to be putting out quality. If you're flipping pieces in 2 hours flat, you're missing something. Be it cleaning, prepping, finishing, you're skimping out on something. It can be exhilarating to just whip out pieces and get that pay. Cha-ching goes the cash drawer. Who doesn't love that? Your clients, that too. And don't think you can pull the wool over on them either. A piece might look just fine sitting there, but you have to remember these people are using these pieces daily in some cases. It's not just sitting there looking pretty. If they're easily scratching the piece every time they try to open a drawer, you skimped out on something. If they can't even dust the piece with a microfiber cloth without catching a piece of paint and peeling it, you skimped out on something. Eventually, you're gonna run out of new customers. This is not the business model you want, obviously. Or let me correct myself. It's not the business model you should want for yourself. You want this scenario. Person sees another person's piece of new furniture and exclaims, "Oh my gosh, that's so gorgeous, where did you get it?" You want your customer to rave about you and be excited to pass your information along to this person. You don't want them to say,
Yeah, it looks pretty, but the paint is peeling and the drawers are wonky.
Now, this said, we can't predict the environment the piece is going into or how well someone's going to take care of it. If you're inland where it's dry and hot and someone on the humid coast buys your piece of furniture, there's a good chance, especially if it's solid wood, that the drawers could swell and expand and suddenly start sticking. Or the opposite, if you live on the coast and someone inland in the desert buys your piece, parts could contract and leave gaps. Someone might use harsh cleaning products on your painted piece and scrub through the finish, or people might not use coasters on that really nice dining table you just did, and they end up with water stains and damage. These things aren't your fault, and outside of giving people general care instructions when they buy the piece, it's out of your control as well. People are several times more likely to pass along a bad review than a good one. It's the same with online reviews, and why when you look up a business, you often see negative reviews and not so many positive ones. It doesn't mean that there's more negative ones than positive, it's just that the positive people aren't going out of their way to tell other people, online particularly, which can obviously leave a skewed impression of your business. Do the work, put the time in, do quality pieces, and you're gonna set yourself up for repeat buyers and referrals, not warnings. R's for record keeping. Boring, I know. This is gonna vary depending on your location. Here in Canada, we deal with Revenue Canada. In the US, it's the IRS. And while things may be similar between the two, there are some differences as well. So I encourage you to speak with a registered accountant in your area and get the facts. I'm just kind of skimming over this. This is just sort of a basic idea of what I do in terms of keeping records for tax purposes. I keep every single receipt related to the business. These are obvious things like supplies purchased, but also some less obvious things like gas receipts. I use my car for work, therefore I can write off certain expenses related to the car. I keep track of every sale, what it was, color I used, who bought it, where it went, how they paid, what they paid. I'm a registered business and I have to charge HST, which is our sales tax here. So I include that as well. Speaking of sales tax, here in Canada, if your sales are under a certain threshold, you aren't required to collect HST, but you still must report the income. I'm a sole proprietor with two businesses. I have my tattoo business and my furniture business. Because I was already set up with a business number for collecting HST for my tattoo business before I started furniture, when I did start furniture, even though it's a complete separate business, I legally have to charge HST for this and any other business I choose to operate, regardless of the income level. And the reason for this is because the business number attaches to my name as a sole proprietor. So because my tattoo business generated over that threshold for annual sales, I was forced to register for a business number to collect HST, and thus any other businesses attached to my name would have to collect HST as well. Confusing, I know, and it's also super annoying. Now, if I incorporated my businesses, each one would become its own entity, and my personal name would be completely separate from these. You'll have to do some digging to find out what the threshold is in your area, as well as any rules around this. Again, I recommend talking to an accountant about that. So here is a list of things that I'm able to claim as expenses for my business. And I keep receipts for all of these. I don't use a program like QuickBooks or anything like that. I just keep a simple spreadsheet on my computer, and at the end of the year, when it's time to turn in all my information to the accountant, I just forward him the spreadsheet and he does the rest. So I can claim vehicle expenses. This includes my loan payment, gas, insurance, maintenance, any tolls or parking tickets, parking fees. You can only claim a percentage of these, so check that with your accountant. Home-based business expenses like internet, office supplies, utilities, phone, etc. But these must be in a dedicated part of your home. For example, for my furniture business, that's the garage. And it also works on a percentage. Like, you can't write off your entire internet bill if you're only using 20% of it for business purposes. You can write off 20% of it. You find out the square footage of your home that the business occupies, then figure out what percentage of the total square footage your home is, and that's what you can write off. For example, if your house is 2,000 square feet and your workroom is 500 square feet, your workroom is then 25% of your total home, and you can write off 25% of your home expenses. Supplies, top coats, paints, stains, brushes, shop vac bags, sandpaper, tools, saw blades, staging props, and anything else you purchase that is directly used for your business. Online fees, so advertising, paid subscriptions. For example, I use a paid subscription to Adobe, WorthPoint, Wix, Shutterstock, Premium Beats for my music. and several other random things. Bank fees, so e-transfer fees, your monthly fee if you have one with your bank account. If you have a storefront or you're thinking about it, you've got your lease, you've got heat, lights, security systems, insurance, staff possibly, all those things you can write off. This is just a small sample. There are other items as well, but I just want you to realize that you do have a ton of expenses and you can get some of that back in tax savings at the end of the year. I know it costs a bit more, but it is worth it to have an accountant to help you maximize your savings. S.
Snacks.
Just kidding. S stands for stop comparing yourself to others and start comparing yourself to others. Let me explain. In a nutshell, there are always going to be people that are better at this than you. It's a given, and you'll be better than other people. As long as you're doing the best work that you can do with the lessons you've learned, the time you put in, and the materials you have to work with, that's all you can do. So stop comparing yourself to other people and just do you. While it is important to see what other people are doing in your area in terms of sales, there are so many variables and what works for them might not actually work for you. And you don't want to outright copy someone anyway. They say imitation is the highest form of flattery. I think that while copying someone is a great way to learn, we should at some point try to branch out or branch off and form our own version, our own style. Honestly, some people are going to flourish in this business and others will not. We all come from different backgrounds, different life experiences and opportunities. Some of these will hinder us and some of them will push us ahead of the competition. Those things you can't really change. What you can do is figure out ways to forge ahead in spite of these things or help pull others along with you in a good way. If you're privileged, give back. Help someone who may be less fortunate than you. Help give them a leg up, be a role model. If you're the one who's had a rough go, it's not a life sentence. Look to others to see how they overcame and then figure out how you can get there too. Easier said than done, I realize. Some of us are just gonna have to work harder than others. What's amazing about starting down here is that you have so much room to learn and to grow. If you're starting up here, that's great in some ways. You're closer to your goal and still have plenty to learn, but you have a responsibility to help balance the scales by trying to help others. People often ask me why I give out tips and tricks in my videos and Instagram and Facebook posts, and now obviously on YouTube. I had another furniture flipper actually say,
I would never give out my secrets.
First of all, nothing I do is really a secret. Sure, I might have some custom colors I made up or some funny little way of doing something, but it's nothing that someone else couldn't figure out over time. Why would I try to keep knowledge to myself? Her answer to that was,
because they didn't earn it, we had to learn all this for ourselves.
Right. And where did we learn it? From blog posts, from YouTube videos, and online courses, Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook, group chats. If none of those people helped and wrote those blog posts and made those videos, half of us wouldn't be where we are. I wish I had the time to answer every single email or question that I have from people looking for advice. I get, more than a dozen a day, sometimes up to 20, and there just isn't the time. It's not that I don't want to help, I just had to figure out a way to give back and help without sacrificing what little free time I have left at the end of the day. And that's how this channel was born. Speaking of time, T is for time. Time is money, we've all heard it, but what does it mean? One of the best lessons I learned in life is that there's no such thing as money. Hear me out. I'm currently trying to buy a new computer. My 8-year-old MacBook just isn't keeping up with the 4K files that I use for these videos, and I need to replace it. There's no way around it. What I'm looking at is about $3,000 after tax. I don't think about this in terms of money. I don't think, okay, this is gonna cost me $3,000. What I think about is, okay, if I average $300 to $500 per dresser, I need to sell 6 to 8 dressers to pay for it, roughly. Each dresser takes a day, sometimes a bit more, but around a day. And I can't just do 8 full days straight in a row, because I have to eat. I have to do other pieces to make money because mama needs snacks and car insurance and pet food. But if I do 1 dresser a week, that's 8 weeks until I can afford my computer. Every dollar you spend, you are trading a small bit of your life for. I spend a day of my life to make a car payment. I spend a day of my life to afford new paint and supplies. You need to value your time. Don't let someone devalue your time by offering you less money than you're asking for something. They might just want to pay less for whatever reason because they can get that brand new dresser at IKEA for the same price. Or maybe they just don't realize how much time and effort actually goes into redoing a piece of furniture. Either way, you've traded hours, days of your life, to produce that result. You should be paid accordingly. Keep this in mind, especially for custom work. U is for unique finishes. Colored waxes, boho paint jobs, glazes, distressing, transfers, stickers, stenciling, etc. You can really get creative in this industry, which is what makes it so much fun. But will that get you paid? That's a tricky one to answer, actually. The short answer is yes, but it might take a bit longer. This really depends on you and the brand you've built for yourself. Are you known for doing bold, wild, crazy colors? Are you known for those smooth boho finishes and blends? Or are you known for farmhouse chippy style? If so, you've built the brand around these things, and chances are people are coming to you to get pieces, and that's a good boat to be paddling. But if you're just starting out, and this is a lesson I learned early on, you might need to play it safe just a bit until you build up that following. You can still do the odd out there piece, but just realize it might take longer to sell. If this is a hobby and you don't need to worry about income right away, that's also a good boat to be in. But if you're trying to make a living, trying to put food on the table, provide for your family, buy snacks, only doing wacky and out there pieces could sink you before you really even get going. What do most buyers want? Around here, they like farmhouse, but not too chippy. They like whites, off-whites. Grays are still really popular here. Beiges, other neutrals. Sage green and robin's egg blue are still fairly popular. Jewel tones are just starting to rise in popularity, but they're not quite there yet here. And black is classic and always sells well for me. There will always be a buyer for hot pink and bright teals and aquas, but they don't sell as fast here. So when I do those pieces, I have to time them just right so that I don't end up without an income for days if it doesn't sell right away. I'm not trying to discourage creativity, and again, things might be different where you are. I'm just saying that for me here, neutrals are king, and those are the ones that pay the bills. I can be experimental in between those pieces. V is for veneer, solid wood, and laminate. Most of the points in these two videos are based on the business rather than the furniture itself or products. But this point, while it refers specifically to furniture, is still really important. Nothing grinds my gears like an ad showing a solid wood piece by a furniture flipper who should know better. That is not solid wood. Learn the difference. Learn how to spot it from afar. Learn how to tell when you're close up looking at the piece. It's not only false advertising, it's misleading to the buyer because you're telling them they have something that they don't. And it just perpetuates down the road when they go to sell that piece eventually because they might put in their ad that it's solid wood because you said it was solid wood. But then when someone points out the pressed wood by looking at the underside of the drawer or the back of the top, you become the arsehole. It can be really confusing, I know. Even I still get stumped from time to time. The terminology is often confused. People calling laminate veneer and people calling veneer laminate. And then the worst, people that don't know what they have calling both of those things solid wood just because it has a wood grain. Veneer is literally wood. It's just thinly sliced and it's glued to a substrate, like this. Laminate is either a man-made sort of plastic product or like a paper product with a printed wood grain on it, loaded to a substrate. And solid wood can be misleading itself because it's not one big slab of wood in most cases. It's strips of solid wood glued together to make one top of a piece. And these glued pieces are sometimes called laminated wood. See the confusion? I sometimes buy laminated wood panels to use as replacement tops for dressers and nightstands, but it is actual wood, it's just glued together. You really need to get a handle on these terms and figure out a way to spot them. I can tell just by looking at a picture of a piece now, for the most part, if it's solid wood or veneer. Some laminates are pretty good and they're hard to tell unless you're close up and can literally inspect it. But veneers often have repeating patterns. There's things you can look for to tip you off as to whether a piece is veneer or solid wood. But yeah, you need to get a grip on these because your business and your reputation is going to depend on it. I did a video a short time back about this exact subject. I'll link to it in the description. Check it out after this video. It does have a lot of really good tips and some visuals in there as well. But nothing helps like experience does. After you look at and work on hundreds of pieces, you figure it out. Same with identifying woods. You can research all you want, and while it might help some, there's no substitute for putting in the time and gaining experience. I picked WORKSPACE. This is a messy business, and if you're fortunate enough to have a basement or a shed or a garage to work in, good for you, it's awesome. I'm so lucky to have a nice dry garage here. Prior to that, every piece I did was in the basement of our last house, which required us to go through a 4-foot half door. So every piece of furniture had to be carried through this little 4-foot door, and it was literally a pain in the neck. Many of you, though, will be working out of your house, like the interior portion of your house. So there are some things to consider for sure. Drop cloths, either the heavy-duty plastic ones, don't bother with the thin stuff. It's slippery and it tends to tear and it's just not worth it. Or even the thick canvas ones will be your best bet. You can also purchase a piece of linoleum flooring in the size you need for your workspace and just roll it up when you're done. That's an easy way to do it too. Ventilation is another consideration. If you can work in a room with windows, that's ideal. If you've got more than one window, that's even better. We deal with a lot of stains, a lot of top coats. Some of us deal with strippers, lacquers, mineral spirits, alcohols, different glues. And while I strive to use as many non-toxic products as possible, you just can't always get away entirely from chemicals for certain pieces and projects. Even if you have windows in your work area, make the small investment and get a good respirator with the appropriate cartridges for what you're working on. So you can get cartridges for vapors and you can get cartridges for fine dust, like for when you're sanding. I have open storage at the moment in my workroom. I would love to eventually have some sort of cabinet, whether it's metal or wood, I don't really care, but something that will close and keep the dust off my products. You can use old china cabinets and dressers for hidden storage, or convert the closet if you're working in like a spare bedroom or something to a shelving unit to tuck all your stuff away. Lock would be a good idea, especially if you have kids or pets. You need to consider temperatures. I have to heat my garage slightly in the winter because a lot of my products shouldn't be below 5 or 10 degrees. And if you live where it gets crazy hot, that's a consideration too, especially with certain chemicals that could be fire hazards. Proper disposal is also critical. Rags used for staining and top coating can spontaneously combust. Hang them outside to completely dry, put them in a metal container with a tight-fitting lid like an old paint can or something, and dispose of them that way. Stripper residue is best disposed of by scooping it into a metal can with a tight-fitting lid and then taking it to a hazardous waste disposal site when it's full. In terms of organizing, pegboard is fantastic in a workroom. I use it to hang most of my small tools and tubes of wood filler. I also hang my sanding discs on it. Check out my workroom tour video. I'll link to that below as well. And it should give you some ideas and some examples of what I do for organization in my garage. X marks the spot. Telling potential buyers about issues with the piece. Do you do it? Do you not do it? What do you do? Do you tell them about the bad break in the drawer that you fixed? Do you go out of your way to point out that scrape? This is a complicated one, and people are probably going to have different takes on this. Here's my practice. If a piece has some form of damage beyond normal wear and tear that I couldn't repair for any reason, I make sure to mention it in the ad. If I'm simply reselling a piece without refinishing and there are marks that are down to the bare wood or some sort of discoloration, I mention that in the ad, as well as posting a picture of said damage or marks. If something has been successfully repaired, I don't mention it in the ad, but I might mention it in my Facebook or Instagram post about the transformation of the piece. If a piece has been refinished but retains minor service marks or the odd scratch that is a bit deeper, but the new finish is completely intact over top of that, I usually won't make a point to mention it unless the coloration is different for some reason. If I'm reselling a piece in original condition with normal wear and tear, like the surface marks, areas where the finish is maybe worn a little bit more, etc. I mentioned that there is normal wear and tear, and then show a picture of anything significant. Will this turn some buyers off? Absolutely. But it's better than someone purchasing something from you online and then showing up and discovering these imperfections. And some may choose to purchase it anyway, but it might leave a stain, no pun intended, on the interaction, and they may avoid you in the future. Or they may decline the sale, which is always awkward, and avoid you in the future. Do you need to document every single scratch or mark on the piece? No, you don't. The majority of people realize these are older pieces that have history, and they understand it's not always going to be showroom quality. I'm cheating a little on this one, I realize, but you try coming up with things that start with Y and Z. For Y and Z, I picked you need Z's, like Z's. It's hard to take time off when you have bills to pay or clients to catch up on. I know this. I've lived it, I'm still living it. You need to have a good end game here. For you, this has to be sustainable, which means you need to recharge. You need to rest, you need to think about something else for a little while, you need sleep, you need to eat better, you need to go for walks, you need to spend time with your family. This is hard to do when you're going full tilt. You leave yourself open to burnout and stress and illness. While there's no such thing as a job with zero stress, most people who do this career are doing so because it's a break from the normal stresses that most people have in their jobs. You get to be creative. You have the satisfaction of taking something that's broken and neglected and making it whole again. That's something that gives most humans the opposite of stress. When I first started doing this, I had a full-time job. I would tattoo during the day, and I would stay up to 1, 2, sometimes 3 in the morning doing furniture. And then I would get up the next day and do it all again, weekends too. This was just a way of life for 2 or 3 years until that situation happened in the world and my tattoo business took a nosedive with the lockdowns. There were 2 of them here in Nova Scotia. I am reopening my tattoo shop in the fall to catch up on about 6 months worth of appointments that had to be canceled during that situation. But until then, this is my only income. I wish I could say that I've learned my own lesson here, but truth be told, I still work into the wee hours of the morning a few nights a week, especially now that I'm doing YouTube on top of regular life. I'm on my own for most of this, so pickups and deliveries can take me anywhere from 2 to 5 hours, sometimes even longer, depending on where I have to drive, just because of where I live. For about a year before the lockdowns, I was pretty much consistently burnt out. I was tired, I felt trapped by my day job, especially when I realized that this less stressful job could make me money, and I wanted to do that instead. It was my plan to finish up the clients that I had and then sort of retire from tattooing, except maybe the odd sort of fun day here and there. But financially, things were tough, really tough. The overhead at my shop was insanely high. I didn't know at that point if I could exist solely on redoing furniture. And then the first lockdown came. My income plummeted to about a quarter of my usual furniture sales and 0 of my tattoo income because all personal services were ordered to close their doors here. The government assistance offered for businesses didn't even cover a quarter of my business expenses, let alone my personal expenses. I was in a constant state of tension and had many nights crying in the dark and screaming inside because I felt trapped. And I didn't know what was going to become of everything I worked so hard for the last decade to build toward, like with my tattoo shop and then finally opening a storefront. At the 3rd month of the lockdown, I decided to close both storefronts, both businesses, my tattoo business and my furniture business. My partner and I put up our house for sale and we started to look for a place where I could work from home, at least for one of those 2 businesses, but we got lucky and we found a unicorn of a house where I could do both. This was right at the beginning of a crazy housing boom here because there were way more buyers than inventory and people were bidding 10, 15, 20,000 over asking price. We lost it on 3 houses even though we overbid on every single one of them. Then we got a call back about the 3rd house that we looked at, which we initially lost, but the previous offer fell through. We were the official backup offer, so we were offered the place if we still wanted it. And like I said, it was our unicorn. It had a garage where I could work on my furniture And the other side of the house had an addition that used to be a doctor's office, and it was already legally zoned for business. It had an outside entrance, it had its own washroom. There was a big room in the basement for our rescue bunnies, which is really important. We have 4 bunnies and we foster from time to time. And it had a lovely backyard, which you've seen in some of my other videos. It just worked out for us right in the nick of time. Long, boring story short, sorry for the ramble. Things have been better since I lost the stress of having the overhead of the 2 shops. I am able to get by on furniture, but I have to work my hiney off. It's my goal this year to be able to take at least 1 day off a week. Just 1 day a week would be amazing. 2, I can't even. Starting the YouTube channel has added a lot of extra work for myself. Pieces that are filmed generally take 2 or 3 times longer to do because you're moving the camera around and trying to get every shot. And then it's, you know, several hours of editing and voiceovers and uploading. But this doesn't even feel like work to me. This is fun. I love it. I just need to get better at time management. There's always room for improvement there, no matter how efficient you already are. If you find you're having to work 15 hours a day, 7 days a week, and are on the verge of burnout or are already there, you might need to take a step back and consider that this might only be a part-time job for you, and you might need a separate normal job to pay the bulk of your bills. No one wants to think about that, but it's not worth the mental anguish of constantly struggling. You can't go at that pace indefinitely, and it will eventually catch up to you, whether that's strained relationships or stress-related illness. If it doesn't bring you joy, only stress, it's not for you. And that's true for anything, not just work. Work-life balance is something that I'm going to have to work on forever. I think I'm finally on the right path, and I'm looking forward to seeing what lies ahead for me and my business, both of them. Well, folks, I know that was long. Again, thank you so much for sticking with me, but there was so much I wanted to pass along to you all. Learn from my mistakes. You'll still make your own, but learn from mine and maybe you won't make as many. The biggest takeaway here is that this job is not for everyone, at least on a full-time basis, but for those who nourish it and treat it like a business, you can have great success with it. You don't always get back everything that you give, so just be mindful where you're focusing your efforts and attention and energy, and you'll be more efficient and successful overall. Thank you for watching. Cheers, and I'll see you in the next video.